Hello there, new viewer. Welcome to my channel. I'm here to fight back against ignorance and stupidity, and this seems to be a platform that a lot of people can be reached on in a very approachable format. Some may say I'm beating a dead horse by arguing against this type of ignorance, but I disagree. People are getting more and more stuck in their own little safe spaces, ignoring all reason, and people suffer consequences because of this. It, families torn apart, young minds corrupted, the crippling of an education system, and things aren't getting too much better. As an added point of self-interest, I get to do the thing that I love most, which is debate topics I really care about, and this time I don't have to get all dressed up and get in a suit and prepare a case for several months in order to be taken seriously. Now, before I present to you my intellectual genius, I'd like to present to you my musical genius. Enjoy.
Are you more valuable than a dog or a cat, or for that matter, a tree?
Yes, of course I believe this, but I'm afraid that's probably not the answer you're looking for, is it?
One of the biggest differences between Judeo-Christian values and secular values concerns this very issue, the worth of the human being.
Oh boy, here we go. Prepare for some strawmen and some blatant, willful ignorance of one's own values.
According to the Judeo-Christian value system, human beings are infinitely valuable. On the other hand, secular humanism devalues the worth of humans.
Here's where you're wrong on your first point, because under the Judeo-Christian value system, human life is worth nothing. What is a couple of years compared to an eternity that you can supposedly experience if you say a few magic words? Secular values bring the value back into the human life, because guess what? The secular worldview understands that there's only one life and there's only one shot at living it. So you'd better protect it and you'd better make it count.
As ironic as it may sound, the God-based Judeo-Christian value system renders humans infinitely more valuable than any humanistic value system.
You see, this is ironic for a different reason than you think. This is ironic because the Judeo God-based belief system believes that humans can rightfully be enslaved, they can rightfully be raped, they can rightfully be killed and stoned to death for rather silly things. Sometimes I wonder whether these people have actually read their own book or whether they've actually considered these moral atrocities perpetrated by their God.
The reason is simple. If there is no God, human beings are only material beings, and therefore not worth anything beyond the matter of which they are composed.
How about this? Let's all convert to Mormonism because under Mormonism, we become gods. Gods are infinitely more powerful than a human being, therefore, it's the best moral system. Gosh, can't you see that logic? It works so well.
But in the Judeo-Christian system, human beings are created in the image of God, meaning that human life is sacred.
Well, if you think about it this way, then any statues made of human beings are also infinitely sacred as well. Are we not worth more than just the image of what we are? I certainly hope that I'm worth more than just my image.
In other words, we are either created in the image of carbon atoms and therefore not worth much more than carbon, or we are created in the image of God and therefore infinitely valuable. Our secular post-Judeo-Christian society has rendered human beings less significant than at any time in Western history. First, the secular denial that human beings are created in God's image has led to humans increasingly being equated with animals.
This is a misinterpretation of most people's view on secularism. We don't believe that we are equated with other animals. We just believe that we are animals. Or, in fact, we acknowledge that we are. It's a truth statement, not a moral contingency.
That's why, over the course of 30 years of asking high school and college students if they would first try to save their dog or a stranger, 2/3 have always voted against the person.
This is what I mean by blatant willful ignorance, because they choose to ignore an entire section of their holy book that's supposed to be true, yet they want to focus on a couple of emotionally weak individuals that took their survey. This is not how you do statistics or researching. This is disingenuous at its core.
They either don't know what they would do or they actually vote for the dog. And many adults now vote similarly.
Citation needed, please.
Why?
Okay, so you're just going to skip over the evidence? Okay, well, let's move on.
There are two reasons. One is that with the denial of the authority of higher values, such as religious teachings,
this is rightful denial of these teachings. Have you even read what they say? Am I just going to stone my child for being a bit unruly? Oh, how about this one? Should we stone homosexuals or should we own slaves? Which one is it?
people increasingly make moral decisions on the basis of how they feel.
There's this thing called empathy where you can feel the pain of others. I don't know if you've ever felt this before, but it's not because of your God. It's actually an evolutionary adaptation, but I'm sure you're just going to skip over this fact, aren't you?
And since just about everybody feels more for their dog than for a stranger, many people simply choose the dog.
I think it's also worth pointing out that in a recent history, there's been an increase in child neglectedness. So when children don't grow up with an intimate parent or parents, they lack these mirror neurons that allow for really, really strong feelings of empathy. This is the reason why there's an increase in the survey, in the hypothetical, even if it's worth something. This is the reason why, not the rise in secularism.
The other reason is that once you get rid of Judeo-Christian values, there's no reason for elevating human worth over that of an animal.
Just gonna ignore that evidence, aren't you? How convenient.
That's why people estranged from Judeo-Christian values, including many Jews and Christians, support programs such as Holocaust on Your Plate.
Wrong. Absolutely wrong. This is the consequence of emotional weakness, not the consequence of the rise of secularism. And it's also important to point out that one of the largest contributors to emotional weakness is these faith-based bullshit religions. Because it's so much easier to just believe what makes you feel good instead of the facts, right? You know a lot about that.
Holocaust on Your Plate is a campaign developed by the animal rights group People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, that teaches that there is no difference between the barbecuing of chickens in America and the burning of Jews in the Holocaust.
Oh, this is rich. This is really, really, really dumb. You say vegan pussies, therefore God. Am I the only one that finds this absolutely retarded?
Why? Because a human and a chicken are of equal worth.
Wrong. Once again, you're really good at being wrong, by the way. Don't be an emotional pussy, which means don't be religious and don't be one of these groveling, pathetic vegans either.
So too, in a notorious Tucson, Arizona case, a woman screamed to firefighters that her 3 babies were in the burning house. Thinking that the woman's children were trapped inside, the firefighters risked their lives to save the woman's 3 cats. If you think these 2 examples are either just theoretical, the dog stranger question, or extreme, the Tucson mother of cats,
then you're right.
here's an issue that is neither theoretical nor extreme.
Here's an idea. Why not just put your best ideas forward instead of wasting our time with pointless, dumb ones and then acknowledging it?
More and more people believe, as PETA does, that even if it would lead to a cure for cancer or AIDS, it would be wrong to experiment on animals.
And here's where we get to deal with the sins of our fathers, not creating a good education system that promotes critical thinking. Because here we go, we have a really, really big philosophical issue that's pretty much easily resolved if you think about things in a utilitarian standpoint, but no. We have to sit here and listen to you lecture us about how morally incapable we are.
In fact, many animal rights advocates believe that even to save a human life, it would be wrong to kill a pig.
The old bait and switch. Now we're not talking about secularism, we're talking about human rights activists. Well, gee, there's a giant difference between the two.
To obtain a heart valve. The 20th century showed vividly what happens to human worth when Judeo-Christian values are abandoned. Nazi Germany and the various communist regimes.
Hitler was a Roman Catholic. You know that, right?
All rejected Judeo-Christian values and ended up slaughtering the largest number of people in human history.
I think it's really important to point out the fact that this was one aspect of the communist regime. This is not the defining characteristic of the communist regime. The defining characteristic is the worship of the state, which led to hundreds of millions of deaths. Just like another form of worshiping that I know is terrorizing the world.
For Nazism, Jews and members of other non-Aryan groups were declared worthless and murdered in the millions. For communists, human worth was determined solely by communist parties, which murdered tens of millions of people.
I don't know why you're condemning these people for this action, because the moral principles that you follow actually mandated a genocide. You aware of that, right?
Only by rejecting Judeo-Christian values.
Correction. Only by worshiping the state
could Nazis declare Jews, Slavs, and others subhuman. And only by rejecting Judeo-Christian values could communist regimes slaughter those they called class enemies. Individual human life meant nothing. Meanwhile, human slavery was abolished only in the Judeo-Christian world.
Because the principles and values of secularism dragged religion kicking and screaming towards sanity.
And of course, for nearly all those who reject Judeo-Christian values, The human fetus is worthless
Oh, not all. Not all, my friend.
if its mother deems it so. Finally, there is an increasingly vocal part of the environmentalist movement that also denigrates human worth. For these individuals, the human being is not infinitely precious. Trees and rivers and mountains are. So,
If you had a single grain of intellectual integrity, of responsibility for words and disingenuousness, then the next words out of your mouth would be, I have completely strawmanned the values, misunderstood them, and then somehow tried to warp and twist the perspective of them to mean something that they do not.
are you more valuable than a dog or a cat or a tree?
I would pretty much say conclusively after this video that I am. And I think I'm worth more than to be tortured forever in hell if I'm an infidel also.
I'm Dennis Prager. That's why the Judeo-Christian value system devalues the worth of humans. The Judeo-Christian value system make moral decisions on the basis of how I feel. Only by rejecting Judeo-Christian values renders humans infinitely valuable.